Have you ever noticed how when someone is pitching you a brand new smartphone, they literally only talk about the shiny features?
Oh, yeah, like the multi-lens camera or the edge-to-edge screen.
Right, exactly. It's all about the OLED screen or, the lightning fast processors and these incredible new apps. But nobody ever tries to sell you on the operating system.
Which is funny because without the OS, it's just a very expensive brick.
Exactly. It's that invisible underlying code that actually, makes sure the camera talks to the memory drive or keeps the battery from draining in like 10 minutes flat.
Yeah, the hardware and the apps are really just promises.
Right. And the operating system is the quiet machinery making those promises real. So welcome to today's deep dive, where we are going to look at the ultimate operating system, the massive, incredibly complex machinery that makes a country function.
I mean, that is an incredibly apt way to look at government because out there in the real world, the politicians are the ones, standing on stage pitching the shiny new apps.
Yeah, grand policies.
Right, the new health initiatives, the infrastructure overhauls. But the actual operating system running quietly in the background, the code compiling all those promises into reality, is public administration.
Because if the code is buggy, the app simply won't launch. I don't care how good the pitch was.
Exactly, it crashes on startup.
So for you listening today, our mission is to decode exactly how that system works, how it breaks down, and how it can be patched.
And we've got some really solid material to work with today.
We do. We're drawing from this extensive March 2025 analysis by the Regent Business School. It's titled, "The Role of Public Administration in South Africa's Development."
A fascinating paper, really.
It really is. We are going to explore what public administration actually is on a mechanical level and why it's the absolute front line for fixing deep historical inequalities in a place like South Africa.
And of course, the massive hurdles it faces when the entire system just starts glitching.
Okay, let's unpack this. If public administration is the operating system, what are the foundational rules it has to follow? So the whole machine doesn't just crash immediately.
Well, a functioning public administration system relies on 5 core principles. Think of them as the base logic of the code. First up is accountability.
Meaning you can't just operate in secret.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Decision makers cannot operate in a black box. They must actively answer to the public for every action and really every dollar spent.
Makes sense.
Second is transparency. Citizens have a fundamental right to access the data that affects their lives. You need to be able to see the budgets, the meeting minutes, the contracts.
Because without that visibility, public trust evaporates instantly.
It does, it vanishes. But that introduces an interesting tension when you get to the third principle, which is efficiency.
Ah, right. Because efficiency is all about managing resources to maximize impact without waste. Doing things quickly and cheaply.
But transparency and accountability require audits, right, and public hearings and just mountains of paperwork.
Which inherently slows things down.
It's the perpetual friction at the heart of government. You are constantly balancing the need to act fast with the mandate to act fairly.
And fairness brings us to the fourth principle, which is equity.
Yes. Equity demands that all individuals, regardless of their zip code or socioeconomic background, benefit uniformly from public services.
Okay, so we've got accountability, transparency, efficiency, equity. What's the fifth?
The fifth principle is responsiveness. Because a rigid system is basically a dead system, the administrative machinery has to adapt its policies to meet the shifting needs of the communities it serves.
Okay, so installing this pristine theoretical operating system onto a brand new device is one thing. But deploying it into an environment like South Africa is entirely different.
Entirely different.
We're talking about a nation where the previous operating system was deliberately designed to exclude the vast majority of the population.
Right, it was coded for exclusion.
So public administration there isn't just about maintaining the status quo. It has a much heavier, much more complicated burden.
It has a profoundly restorative mission. The Regent for Analysis makes it very clear that the role of a public administrator in South Africa goes far beyond just keeping the lights on.
Or paving the roads, yeah.
Right. It is fundamentally tasked with dismantling deep historical inequalities. It's actively trying to lift marginalized communities out of poverty.
It's literally an engine for social repair.
Exactly. The daily mandate involves providing affordable health care, overhauling education, generating sustainable jobs, and aggressively guaranteeing access to basic services for previously excluded groups.
I have to push back a little here, though. We are talking about a sprawling bureaucracy, right?
We are.
And bureaucracies, by their very nature, are designed for consistency, routine, and, risk aversion.
That's the textbook definition, yes.
So aren't we asking an administrative system to act as a moral compass? Like if you ask the equivalent of a national DMV to solve systemic historical inequality and drive a restorative social revolution, aren't you just guaranteeing failure?
That is the exact paradox public administrators face every single morning. It's a massive ask.
It really is.
But to understand why it's so difficult and why it doesn't just immediately collapse into chaos, you have to look at the actual mechanics of their day-to-day jobs.
Okay, how does it actually work on the ground?
The restorative mission is broken down into 4 tangible pillars of action. It operates sort of like a chain of custody. Pillar 1 is policy implementation,
Which is where the political promise say a new housing subsidy is converted into an actionable legal program.
Exactly. You write the rules, you define the eligibility, and you set the targets.
But I mean, a rule on a piece of paper doesn't build a house, which naturally triggers pillar 2, right? Resource management.
Precisely. And that's usually the bottleneck. Resource management is the brutal daily grind of securing the financial, physical, and human capital required to actually execute that policy.
So finding the money in the budget, sourcing the raw materials, hiring the engineers.
Right. If you fail at the resource stage, the policy remains a ghost. It's just a nice idea.
And if you somehow succeed, you finally reached the 3rd pillar, which is really the only one the average citizen actually sees service delivery.
Yes. This is the water flowing out of the tap. It's the electricity powering the clinic, the teacher standing in the classroom.
And the overarching goal here, especially in the South African context, is ensuring these essentials are affordable and accessible to lower-income earners.
Because if the water doesn't flow, the citizen does not care about your brilliant policy implementation.
Or the complex resource management. They just know the system failed.
Which brings us to the crucial 4th pillar, public engagement.
The feedback loop.
Exactly. A bureaucracy cannot operate in isolation. It has to create channels for citizens to participate in local governance.
To voice their grievances when that water doesn't flow.
Right, and to help shape the priorities of their specific municipality. When people feel heard, you maintain a baseline of public satisfaction, even when service delivery is struggling.
Okay, so when you lay it out as a sequential chain policy, resources, service delivery, and engagement, it becomes incredibly obvious where the weak links are.
Oh, absolutely. The cracks show up fast.
Yeah, moving from the goals of the system to the reality on the ground, South Africa's development is currently facing a massive systemic bottleneck.
The report highlights a sort of triple threat of challenges that routinely crashes this operating system.
Let's break down the mechanics of the first one, which is corruption and mismanagement.
Right. And corruption isn't just a moral failing here. It is a mechanical destruction of that chain of custody we just discussed.
Because it attacks the resource management pillar.
Predominantly, yes. When funds are siphoned off through inflated contracts or bribery, the financial resources meant for essential services simply vanish.
The clinic doesn't get built because the money meant for bricks went into a private bank account.
Exactly. But the secondary effect is actually far more dangerous. It totally severs the 4th pillar, public engagement.
Because of the loss of trust.
Yes. When citizens witness blatant corruption, the feedback loop of trust shatters. They stop participating, they might stop paying local rates, and the entire social contract dissolves.
And that stolen capital drastically exacerbates the second major challenge, which is severe resource constraints. Now, obviously, corruption drains the treasury, but looking at the fiscal reality, the government is facing intense budget limitations that go way beyond just craft rock.
Its structural financial pressures are immense. For instance, a massive portion of South Africa's national budget is consumed entirely by the public wage bill.
Wow. So just paying the salaries of the government workers.
Yes. You are paying for a massive workforce to manage the administrative state, which leaves a shrinking slice of the pie for actual capital expenditure.
It's like, it's like a hospital spending 90% of its total operating budget just hiring thousands of administrators, managers, and HR staff.
But then having absolutely no money left over to actually buy MRI machines.
Right. Or stock the pharmacy with antibiotics, or keep the lights on in the operating room. You have this huge staff managing a facility that can't actually heal anyone.
That is the exact dynamic playing out on a national scale. And the remaining budget is further choked by debt servicing obligations.
Oh, paying off loans?
Exactly. When a government has to spend a massive, non-negotiable chunk of its monthly revenue just paying the interest on money it borrowed years ago, current priorities are starved.
So critical areas like rural development, sanitation upgrades, and underprivileged schools simply do not receive the capital injections they desperately need to fulfill that restorative mission.
Which creates an inevitable domino effect straight into the third challenge, inefficient service delivery.
Right. Because when the budget is devoured by the wage bill, historical debt, and corruption, the services on the ground just collapse.
The water infrastructure degrades, the power grid fails, and healthcare clinics run out of supplies.
And according to the source, this failure is heavily concentrated in rural and historically underserved areas.
And when communities are left entirely neglected, they don't just, write a stern letter to their representative.
No, it results in widespread, often disruptive community protests. The system has failed them, so they take to the streets.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the failure of service delivery isn't just a symptom of an empty bank account.
What else is driving it?
Well, there is a deep structural flaw in the architecture of the government itself that manufactures these inefficiencies. We have to look at the fragmentation of responsibilities across the national, provincial, and local spheres of government.
I found this part of the analysis absolutely fascinating. It's like hiring 3 completely different contractors to build a house, giving them all different blueprints, and actively forbidding them from talking to each other.
Yes.
Of course the roof is going to leak. You have the national government setting a grand policy mandate, let's say a nationwide initiative, to build new rural health clinics.
Okay, good policy.
Then the provincial government is handed the budget and told to manage the actual healthcare portfolio.
Right.
But then the local municipality is the one who actually owns the land, has to zone it, and has to physically connect the water and power lines to the site.
And that is exactly where the execution dies. The fragmentation creates an endless loop of miscommunication and jurisdictional battles.
Just bouncing the responsibility around.
Exactly. National decrees the clinic, provincial takes 2 years to release the funds, and local realizes they don't even have the civil engineers on staff to actually build the water infrastructure for it.
Because they aren't seamlessly integrated, resources get stalled.
Directives contradict each other, and the unspent money often gets rolled back into the treasury at the end of the financial year. The citizen waiting for a doctor is left staring at an empty plot of land.
So we have a crashing operating system, a drained battery, and 3 different developers arguing over the source code.
It's a mess.
Diagnosing a leaking roof is easy. Fixing it is the hard part. So how is the public administration sector actively trying to debug this massive multi-layered system?
Well, there are several aggressive structural reform initiatives currently being deployed, and they are directly targeting those specific vulnerabilities, starting with the most corrosive element, corruption.
Here's where it gets really interesting. One of the primary anti-corruption tools deployed is something called a lifestyle audit.
Yes, a very powerful tool.
From a mechanical standpoint, this is brilliant. Instead of trying to track a complex, heavily obfuscated web of shell companies and offshore bank accounts, you just look at the end result.
You review the daily lifestyle of a public official.
Right. If an administrator is taking home a modest, standard civil servant salary, but they are suddenly driving a fleet of imported luxury SUVs,
Sending their kids to elite overseas boarding schools.
and buying multi-million rand estates, the math simply doesn't work. The lifestyle audit flags that disproportionate asset growth as a giant, flashing red light.
You don't need to find the bribe right away. You just point to the Ferrari and say, explain this.
It reverses the burden of proof in a very practical way.
It does. It's a highly observable metric for accountability. And this is paired closely with mandatory financial disclosures, where officials are required by law to regularly declare all outside income, business interests, and property holdings.
And these tactical measures are housed under the National Anti-Corruption Strategy, right?
Yes, a decade-long framework running until 2030, aimed at embedding a culture of absolute zero tolerance across all government departments.
But catching a corrupt official after they've bought the Ferrari means the money's already gone.
Very true.
So how do they actually lock down the vault? How are they reforming the way the government buys things in the first place?
That requires tackling public procurement, which is universally the most vulnerable point for public funds.
Because that's where the massive contracts are awarded.
Exactly. To stop the leakage, you have to look at the mechanisms enforced by 2 foundational pieces of legislation. First is the Public Finance Management Act, or PFMA, for national and provincial departments.
Okay, the PFMA.
And second is the Municipal Finance Management Act, the MFMA, for local government.
And what do those acts actually do? Like, are they just a set of guidelines or do they have teeth?
Oh, they have teeth. They enforce a highly rigid, standardized supply chain process. Under the PFMA and MFMA, a government official cannot just pick up the phone and award a R1 million contract to their cousin's construction firm.
That would be convenient, but illegal.
Highly illegal. The acts mandate open, competitive bidding processes. They require independent bid adjudication committees.
So multiple layers of approval.
And they demand that any deviation from the standard tender process be publicly documented and justified to the Auditor General.
So the explicit goal is to choke off tender fraud.
Yes, and prevent the exact scenario where the state pays triple the market rate for a road that just washes away in the first rainstorm.
Okay, so we have lifestyle audits to catch the bad actors and strict procurement acts to lock the vault. But earlier we talked about how adding layers of accountability naturally destroys efficiency.
The paperwork problem.
Yeah. How do you stop corruption without drowning the entire government in red tape?
The primary mechanical solution to that bottleneck is the aggressive digitization of government systems. Moving away from a paper-based bureaucracy is completely transformative.
By digitizing citizen services, things like business licensing, ID registration, or vehicle renewals.
Exactly. You completely remove the human intermediary.
Right, because if a process is entirely automated on a secure server, you can't exactly slide a 50 Rand note to an algorithm to expedite your application.
You remove the physical toll booth where petty corruption thrives.
That makes so much sense.
Furthermore, digitization creates an immutable digital footprint. Every approval, every fund transfer, and every contract awarded leaves a trackable data trail.
It makes it exponentially harder to just lose a file to protect an ally.
But technology alone isn't a silver bullet. The system still requires human oversight, which is why strengthening whistleblower protections is a critical parallel reform.
You need robust legal frameworks that guarantee anonymity and shield insiders from retaliation.
Because if the people managing the digital systems are too terrified to report the anomalies they see, the technology is essentially useless.
Right. The human element is still the weakest link.
This raises an important question, however. You can implement the strictest finance acts in the world. You can build state-of-the-art, fully digitized procurement portals.
What?
But are new laws and fancy software enough if you don't have the right personnel operating the machinery? The consensus in the analysis is that the ultimate long-term fix demands the professionalization of the entire public sector.
Meaning what, practically?
Yeah.
Firing the old guard and demanding everyone have a master's degree.
It is about fundamentally shifting the hiring and promotion metrics away from political patronage and toward meritocracy.
So actual skills over political connections.
Yes. Professionalizing the sector means institutionalizing a culture where deep technical knowledge of how government machinery works is a baseline requirement, not an optional bonus.
But crucial to this, especially in the context of South Africa's restorative mission, is prioritizing rigorous ethical standards alongside those technical capabilities.
Absolutely. You need civil servants who are not only capable of navigating the MFMA, but who are deeply anchored to the moral imperative of equitable service delivery.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? It means that public administration is arguably the most high-stakes profession in any developing nation.
It is definitely not just pushing papers in a dusty back office.
Not at all. It is the vital, pulsing lifeline for human development. It is the operating system that literally dictates whether a child in a rural village receives a functioning education.
Or whether a local clinic has the municipal water pressure required to sterilize its equipment.
And to debug that system, to root out the corruption, bypass the crushing wage bill, and synchronize the fragmented national and local blueprints, you need highly trained, ethically unwavering architects to rewrite the code.
And that demand for skilled architects is where the educational pathway becomes critical. The analysis specifically points to programs like the Regent Bachelor Public Administration.
Which isn't just an academic exercise in memorizing old bureaucratic theory.
No, it is a tactical training ground designed for this exact 21st century reality. It teaches students how to map complex political environments and manage public affairs across those fragmented spheres of government.
And actually implement the ethical frameworks required to rebuild public trust.
It is literally training the mechanics who will maintain the nation's operating system.
It is an immense responsibility, but an incredibly powerful one. I mean, if you can master resource management and navigate the complexities of policy implementation, you are the person who actually forces the arc of the state toward justice, and prosperity.
Which leaves us with a rather profound prospect for the immediate future.
Whoa.
We discussed the massive push to digitize government systems to remove human bottlenecks and create trackable footprints for accountability.
Right, the digital trails.
But we are currently standing on the precipice of an entirely new technological era. If basic digitization can significantly reduce petty corruption and streamline efficiency, how will the eventual integration of advanced artificial intelligence reshape this operating system?
Oh, wow, that is a massive paradigm shift.
Consider the mechanics. If an AI system could be deployed to automatically cross-reference and audit thousands of public procurement tenders in real time.
Instantly flagging shell companies or price inflation before the money ever leaves the Treasury.
Yes. Or if an AI could instantly map the fragmented communications between a national health department and a local municipality to predict supply chain failures before a clinic runs out of medicine.
It could fundamentally alter the speed of national development.
Could a rigorously designed, hyper-efficient, non-human intelligence finally solve the deeply entrenched, distinctly human problem of corruption and mismanagement in public administration?
That is an incredible thought to leave off on. We started by comparing public administration to the invisible operating system running on your phone.
And we've seen how catastrophic bugs like systemic corruption and fragmented blueprints cause the whole machine to crash.
Starving communities of the essential services they need to survive. But we've also opened the repair manual. We've seen how radical transparency, strict ethical professionalization, and perhaps eventually non-human intelligence can rewrite that code to deliver on the ultimate promise of equity.
It's a huge task, but a necessary one.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the systems running quietly in the background around you, and we'll catch you next time.